Once again, very good afternoon, all. Uh, I was here throughout the last session, and Ketav has actually talked about a lot on the larger scenarios and the emerging future that is, taking shape in the renewable energy domain, and even the hands-on exercise. I think that must have given you some flavor in terms of how companies are thinking about, their IRR and investment in the renewable energy domain. What I'm going to talk about is more on the policy front. So we would be discussing the overall sectoral related challenges, and then we will cover few case studies, one on the billing and metering side, as well as another case study on let's say innovation that is taking place on the distribution side. So how utilities, or let's say regulators, or policymakers take some of those decisions. So I'll be sharing those few examples as well as part of my presentation. But largely, we are going to cover the distributed renewable energies, which is rooftop solar in Indian context. Obviously, there could be other DRE technologies as well. For example, small hydropower plant, biomass, microgrids, and those things. Quickly talking about CEW, Council on Energy, Environment and Water, we are ranked amongst Asia's leading policy research institution. We have been working across 7 focus areas, and we also have a dedicated Center for Energy Finance. I will, just quickly talk about each of these areas, so that because many of you are also interested in terms of what kind of work we do and what opportunities are there. By way of introducing these individual focus areas, I will also try to share some of those details with you. So in the first row, you see energy access, renewables, and power sector. This particular row actually targets some of the immediate sectoral issues, be it related to, let's say, energy access, where right now, probably because the grid electrification is more than 99% in India, but few years back, there were many households and villages who were not getting 20, like they didn't even have electricity connections, and many of those who had electricity connection, they were hardly getting electricity only for few hours, and that was also during, let's say, late night hours when you don't actually need it. So how do we solve these problems? So we used to do pan India survey, where we targeted about like now 9,000 households, try to understand what is the state of electricity, and redefine the way energy access is perceived in India, because earlier it was only based on electricity connection, but quality of supply and reliability were also the important dimension. So that's the change we brought in the overall this debate around energy access. And now Ministry of Power would be using the same survey every few years to understand the state of electricity in India. Similarly, under the energy access, we are also looking at livelihood opportunities, how we can use renewable energies to create more income, more jobs for the rural population. So that is also something that we are doing under energy access. Renewables is everything about utility RE as well as distributed RE, supporting the markets, addressing market issues such as let's say integration of renewables, manufacturing, supply chains, incentive structures, policies, regulations, as well as looking at socioeconomic benefits, or we call it co-benefits, because renewables, they also lead to higher employment in the sector. So if we have to transition from, let's say, conventional coal to renewables, whether we are actually going to generate more jobs, or whether there would be net loss of jobs in the power sector. And similarly, as most of you know that coal mines are towards the eastern part of India, whereas renewable resources are in the western and the southern part of India. So from a state's perspective, if let's say if we are phasing down coal, which means states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, their people will be unemployed, whereas people based out of, let's say, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they will get employment in the renewable energy sector. So how do we manage those dynamics also to support higher renewable energy deployment in India? So that we deal under the renewable energy team. Power sector is more focused on legacy power sector. So solving issues such as power purchase agreements, because DISCOM signed these PPAs for 25 years. Now there are these renewable based cheaper alternative sources are available. So how do we bring synergies between those two options to minimize the DISCOM's expenditure or cost on the power procurement? Similarly, let's say if consumers are whether the consumers are satisfied with billing or whether they are paying their bills on time, what kind of strategies could be adopted to nudge these consumers to pay their electricity bills on time? So some of those kind of issues we undertake under the power sector team, and obviously also then bringing synergies between renewables and power sector on issues such as RE integration that we were discussing, or dispatch, or looking at the overall power mix. The second row is really mid to long term scenarios. So for example, let's say by 2050 or 2100, uh, what kind of energy mix we would witness, what could be the various pathways to that. So from the consumption perspective, we know we have demand, electricity demand in buildings, and we have demand in industries, we have demand in traction or mobility, and then we have demand in agriculture. So among these various sectors, how we can design that transition, whether should we focus on manufacturing industries, or should we focus more on let's say agricultural sector to reduce the overall carbon intensity in India. Similarly, like the sixth team, which is on risk and adaptation, is looking at, because of climate change, if that is going to pose or impose certain threats to existing and the upcoming industries or different sectors, or even let's say human health. So how we can anticipate some of those risks in the future, and develop or help states and city municipalities develop adaptation strategies. And the last thing, which is on technology, finance, and trade, is looking at some of these emerging technologies and solutions. So, for example, let's say Netherlands is very advanced in offshore wind technology. And if India wants to deploy offshore wind, because we also have a long coastline, what kind of G2G arrangements has to take place? Similarly, what kind of financing we would need to facilitate that, as well as creating the whole industry for offshore wind in India. So those kind of interactions and work is taking place under technology, finance, and trade. And just to give you another example, like many of you might not have heard about geoengineering. That is like really a future technology where we can put aerosols in the atmosphere to block the sun, so that we can control the rising earth temperature. So even those kind of things, which are really futuristic, looking at the governance principles and frameworks, how countries would collaborate, work together. Because let's say if India is, injecting these aerosols in the atmosphere, it could also impact Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nepal, Bhutan, or even China, right? So anticipating those things, and then try to bring solutions towards that. Moving on, so this slide is just to set the context. as Keta was talking, and even we all know historically or even currently, uh, if we look at demand and supply, we have these concentrated demand centers as well as concentrated generation centers as well. So we use large coal plants, gas plants, nuclear plants to generate electricity. We transfer that power over long distance and then supply or consume it in our buildings as well as in the industry. Uh, during these initial years, and the focus has been on decarbonizing the sector, where we are trying to deploy these utility scale solar and wind. And Keta, captured that aspect. But as the distributed renewable energy options are emerging, for example, rooftop solar in other countries, it could be micro wind turbines, it could be geothermal, it could be biomass based power, it could be microgrids, even with the storage. So more and more the smaller and distributed systems are going to get built, and they would be integrated in the distribution grid. So the in the near term, the future is more decentralized. And then in the long run, with IoT solutions, there would be concepts such as urban microgrids, peer-to-peer tradings, so that generation as well as consumption, along with interaction with multiple entities, would be taking place simultaneously. So we are moving, we are, let's say, targeting to decarbonize the sector on the centralized power plant, but then the future would be decentralized, and eventually there would be more digital solutions which will facilitate deeper decentralization of generation as well as consumption. So from that perspective, rooftop solar in Indian context is very important in medium to long run, and we really need to create or provide the desired support to build the sector. If we look at the rooftop sector in India, the residential sector, which is again these urban centers as well as smaller towns, they consume about 24% of the overall electricity that is being generated. And if we translate that into equivalent rooftop solar capacity, it could be more than 180 gigawatt. And if we compare that with the this rooftop solar potential that exists in the sector, is around 174 gigawatt. So we see that we can meet this demand to a large extent, whereas if you see the actual deployment, it is only about 16% of the total capacity that has been constructed so far in the rooftop solar sector. So when we look at the overall potential and the deployment in the sector, uh, there is clear contrast. Uh, from the previous chart, it is very evident that if, let's say, potential is almost 83% in the residential sector, the deployment has also be, it should be significantly higher in the residential sector. However, it's only 16%, whereas much of the deployment is happening in the commercial and the industrial sector. So why that is the case? So, to understand that, we really need to consider the different stakeholders who are part of the value chain and what kind of challenges that they are facing, so that we can systematically address those challenges through, let's say, policy interventions, regulatory interventions, or even based on market interventions. So in the ecosystem, there are these four key stakeholders: consumers, obviously, because they are going to install these systems. Developers are the solar companies who are going to construct these plants. Then there are discoms, because they would be providing net metering and grid connection. So they are also an important stakeholder. And lastly, financiers, who would provide the debt funding to install or construct these capacities. So from their perspective, there are various market challenges to all these consumers, or sorry, to all these stakeholders. From consumers, again, I think most of you already know these high upfront cost, even after significant decline in the uh, capital cost of rooftop solar systems, it is still quite expensive for most consumers, because uh, residential consumers are still consuming in the range of 200 to 300 units per month, and they already get much cheaper electricity tariff. So when we look at the economic viability, that viability is still not there for these consumers in the rooftop segment. Second, because these systems have higher upfront cost, consumers are looking for debt capital, but because the banks are not providing them solar loans, access to finance is also a major issue. Even those, some of them who are willing to install rooftop solar systems are not able to install because they can't avail solar loans, and they do not have sufficient capital to uh, uh, provide or fund the entire capital cost of the system. Similarly, there would be a 25-year roof lock-in. So once you install the system or the panels would last for 25 years. What if you want to, tomorrow your children are going to get married, and you would want to build another floor? So then what do you do with the solar system, right? So those kind of concerns are also there. Some of them are using these rooftops for commercial activities, like we see in Bombay or even Bangalore, Delhi, everywhere. We have a lot of these rooftop cafes, bars, and even coaching institutes. Many of these commercial activities are taking place. So, from consumers' perspective, those are more lucrative than rooftop solar installations. And lastly, consumers are still not aware about the technology. They may have heard about the technology, but they don't really know about, its benefit, how to avail it, what are the government schemes, what are the benefits, what is the application process with discoms, which of these vendors are of good quality, and all those detailed information is still not there, even though people are aware of the technology as such. And then from Discom's perspective, again, because the adoption of rooftop solar is purely driven on the economic viability. Like Keta was mentioning, for all these larger companies, they are investing in renewables not because they want to help the environment, or put up a fight against the climate change, but because there are returns that they are getting by investing their capital in the renewable energy technology. So similarly, from consumers, they get higher returns when they install rooftop solar system. But these are also high-paying consumers for utilities. So in a way, consumer is benefiting, but utilities or discoms are losing their high-paying customers and their revenues. So discoms don't want to do that, and they are opposing rooftop solar deployment in the sector. Some of the other challenges include, the skilled staff, what we were talking about in the first session. Uh, Even to inspect these systems, or even to ensure the good quality, even the discom staff doesn't have all the required information and knowledge about the technology. So that is also, creating a roadblock in the rooftop solar deployment. And then the market side, or the industry side, developers and financiers, from their perspective, because rooftop solar are smaller systems, economy of scale is not there. So for example, I can build, let's say 50 or 100 megawatt power plant in one go if I participate in a utility bid. But let's say if I have to even build 1 megawatt power plant in the residential category, I would, probably need 100, 200 households to participate. Or if it is, let's say, commercial or industrial customer, I would need about 10 to 20 such customers. So, just think about the kind of headache these companies will go through if they have to deal with 20 different customers, even for 1 megawatt. For 100 megawatt, it would be then, become 2000 customers. Rather, they would just want to, let's say, deal with the government and install 100 megawatt in one location. So that is another big challenge that, from industry side, there are not many players who actually want to enter in the sector because the economy of scale is not there. And same also goes for financiers, because these systems are of, compared to, some of the other loan requirements. For example, let's say if you are buying a flat or if you are constructing a house, the loan requirement are in the range of 70, 80 lakh rupees, or even 1 crore. Whereas for rooftop solar systems, it would be, let's say, 2 lakh rupees, 4 lakh rupees. And again, the same logic applies. Would you prefer a customer who is looking for 1 crore loan and do the due diligence only once? Or do you want to have, let's say, 100 customers who just need 1 lakh rupee loan and do the due diligence 100 times to disperse the same capital, right? So banks are also then, not creating these dedicated loan schemes for rooftop solar. So, how we can kind of address these challenges and how government is thinking about it is on four fronts. One, they want to involve discoms, because discoms are opposing rooftop solar because their high paying consumers are going away from the grid, or consuming more power from rooftop solar. So they want to somehow involve discoms in the whole ecosystem more actively by providing, or creating additional incentive for the discoms. Second, they want to educate the customers and create more awareness. Third, they want to bring in more innovation. So, there could be various innovative business models. For example, on-bill finance could be there, community solar could be there, solar feeder model is there. So there are these various business models that discoms or industry players can roll out, which will address many of these challenges for customers. For example, let's say if we can build a larger plant in one location, and households can buy a certain capacity. So I can build a 100 kilowatt plant and give away 1 kilowatt to each household, right? So they won't have to let go their rooftop because the plant is centrally located in some other geography. Plus, the economy of scale benefit would also be there, because instead of 1 kilowatt, now I'm installing 100 kilowatt. So the prices would be cheaper for that. So it will then really kind of enable those customers to also adopt or avail solar electricity. So, really looking at some of those innovations in the sector. And last but not the least, creating enabling or supportive policy and regulatory interventions. This could include incentive schemes. This could include, let's say, a billing and metering mechanism. This could include even, let's say, a waiver of transmission charges and those things. Moving on, talking about the schemes from the central government. Late in 2019, MNRE came up with a grid connected solar rooftop program phase 2. As part of this program, they are providing capital subsidy up to 40% for solar power plants up to 3 kilowatt. And that subsidy is reduced to 20% for plant capacities between 3 to 10 kilowatt. Earlier in the phase one of the scheme, there was a flat 30% capital subsidy. But then because consumers who require these higher systems, they are already paying higher tariff. So the economic viability, has been achieved for those consumers. So they don't really need, significant capital support, or sorry, significant subsidy support from the government. Rather, it is the consumers who are in the lowest slab, those who are, let's say, consuming 100, 200 units a month. And for them, the great tariff are about, let's say, 2.5 rupees, 3 rupees, 4 rupees. So economic viability is not there. So there we need the capital subsidy, which can then bring down the overall investment or the capital cost of the system and improves the economic viability. Then they have made DISCOMs the lead implementation agency for the scheme. Earlier, it was the state nodal agencies. All the states have dedicated government departments, which are renewable energy development agencies, and they were responsible for, let's say, selecting vendors, solar vendors, disbursement of capital subsidies from central as well as the state government. But now, under the new scheme, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has designated DISCOMs as the lead implementation agency. And then there are, they are also incentivizing DISCOMs in a progressive manner for additional capacity installations in their distribution areas. Apart from that, there are, concessional and priority sector lending that has been notified by Reserve Bank of India. There are also, tax benefits in terms of accelerated depreciation as well as tax holidays. But also, states have their own dedicated solar policies. The focus of these policies has been one on the further or additional capital subsidies. So there is a subsidy from the central government, and then there could be a subsidy from the state government as well, on top of what you are getting from the central government. And then they also have additional incentive in the form of, let's say, generation based incentive that are provided to the customers, or the compensation for the excess generation at the end of the year. So those things are talked about in these state policies. Apart from that, the state policies focus on the system sizes that can be installed under the rooftop scheme. So the chart on the left it talks about the minimum capacity requirement. So for example, most of the states have notified minimum 1 kilowatt system, whereas 14 states have not specified any minimum requirement. However, what is very interesting is states like Chhattisgarh and West Bengal have notified significantly higher minimum capacity requirement, which means, even if we talk about West Bengal, which is a 5 kilowatt, it is kind of taking out most of the household because they need about 2 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt, or 4 kilowatt system. So that is one of the shortcoming of their solar policy. But here we are just trying to talk about what are the different contours of these state solar policies. Similarly, they also specify the upper limit of these systems. The other things that are captured is on the sanction load. So all these solar the consumers, they already have electricity connection, and sanction loads are already mentioned in their bills as per the actual load or the equipment that they have. Corresponding to that, you can either install rooftop solar system below that capacity or above that capacity. That is also decided by the states. So, for example, 9 states have said that you cannot install more than the sanction load. So, let's say if my sanction load is 10 kilowatt, I cannot install a rooftop solar system more than 10 kilowatt. 22 states have said, you can install up to your sanction load. And similarly, few states are also allowing above the sanction load. And then, more importantly, on the bottom right corner, talks about banking of power, or electricity that you can inject in the grid, and whether that would be compensated or not. So, like most states, again, about 25 states have said that you can inject more than 100% from your consumption, and you will still be compensated. Whereas 11 states are saying that based on your annual consumption, only you can be compensated for 80 to 100% or that 20% margin of the electricity. And then there are these various compensation mechanisms in the form of either net metering, gross metering, and Delhi has also introduced virtual net metering and group net metering. Again, finer details are provided about these metering mechanisms in the state solar policies, which includes, compensation period. It could be monthly, quarterly, yearly, and then also compensation mechanism, whether it would be compensated at average power procurement cost, which is what discoms pay to their coal power plant generators, or it would be, let's say, these compensation tariffs would be determined by state electricity regulators, or would there be some other mechanism to determine these tariffs. Uh, actually, in the interest of time, I am quite rushing through the content, but I'm also trying to create some time towards the end of my presentation so that we can take up few questions. So on the metering side, see, the biggest issue is when we talk about net metering or gross metering, they either benefit the consumer or they benefit the discom. So in case of net metering, you are compensated at the tariff that you are paying to the discom, which means based on the cost of the system, you are generating electricity at 3 rupees or 4 rupees, but discom is paying you 7 rupees. So the consumer is benefiting, but discom is losing their money. However, in case of gross metering, discom is saying, I can let's say generate power or take power at 2 rupees or 3 rupees from, let's say, coal power plants, or even larger solar and wind power plants. So I will only be compensating you at that rate, whereas the actual cost of generation is 4 rupees. So in this case, even though discom is benefiting, but the consumers, they are losing out their money. So the economic viability is not there. And to address this problem, many state discoms are looking for alternative tariff mechanism. And CEW, we have created this framework to also account for various indirect benefits that rooftop solar is offering, so that discoms can then consider that while they are determining or deciding the compensation for solar electricity in a much more equitable manner. In the second example, where discom said that they will only pay 2 rupees for solar electricity, they can even pay them, let's say, 4.5 based on these indirect benefits. So this is one such example, which will eventually feed into determining some of these tariff mechanisms or the compensation mechanism that we will see going forward in India across many states. So, this framework again takes into account the details related to location, as well as the time of the day and time of the generation. We can calculate these various cost and benefit from discom perspective, consumer perspective, or even society perspective. But before that, let's quickly talk about how DISCOMs actually determine the final electricity tariff for consumers. So they start with, as we can see in the top left corner, they start with energy demand forecast. They add distribution losses to that and calculate how much energy or electricity they would need at the periphery level. On top of that, then they add transmission losses because the plants are located outside the the load centers, and calculate the total energy demand. And corresponding to that, then they will determine which all power plants they will be utilizing to fulfill or to meet the energy demand, and accordingly, the power purchase cost would be decided. On top of that, you would add your transmission charges, you will add discom charges, and determine the average cost of supply, and that is what is charged to the consumers. So we again, as part of this framework, based on the discoms, the uh, cost calculation model, we have determined what all additional or indirect benefits are provided by rooftop solar, and similarly, what are the cost components. So we take into account all these parameters and determine the net value or net benefits which will be there. And again, many of you were interested to know about uh, you know uh, the opportunities on data analytics and those front. So here we have actually used large data sets from utilities on many of these parameters to calculate those benefits. And this is how then we eventually represent it. So blue bars are the benefits which discoms will get from rooftop solar, and the orange bar is the revenue loss that they will get when consumers move away from the grid and start generating their own solar electricity. But still, there is a net benefit of 22 paisa. Uh, what does that tell is, discoms should not be worried or concerned about losing any revenue, because eventually they are getting more benefit from rooftop solar. So in the near future, they need not to change the metering mechanism, but in the long run, they can also use this framework to decide, what would be those additional compensation or charges that can be levied on the consumers. I will actually, in the interest of time, stop there and take few more, questions from your side. Uh, the another example was on the urban microgrids, but probably I can share the PowerPoint with all of you, and then if you have any more specific question on that, we can separately connect. But I'll stop here my presentation, and happy to take few questions before we move on to the last session of the day. Thank you, everyone.